Okay, now we're going to talk about starting to build the form onto our armature. So remember, we've got this little armature of the zebra. And now what I'm going to do is I want to start building up his muscles and just all the form that's in his body, because he's not a little stick figure, right? He has some form. So I have some newspaper that I've already torn into strips for easier handling. And I also have some masking tape. So you will need a little bit of each of those things. So what I'm going to do, and I'm still using my printout for reference, because he's got some thickness here, and it helps me if I look at this reference photo. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to kind of get the size of his head figured out. So I want to build that up with my newspaper, and I'm just going to wrap some newspaper around here. And his head is thicker on the top, and it gets thinner towards the bottom. And it doesn't have to be exact. I just want to get a little bit built up. And I'm just going to take a small amount of masking tape, and I'm going to tape that down so that it's going to stay. Okay, then I'm going to start working on his body, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just kind of crumpling up my paper, and then I'm just kind of forming it around his body. And I'm going to check back at it and look, and I'm going to see, okay, is that thick enough? That's pretty thick. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some masking tape. And you could already have these all ripped out. That would have been a good idea for me to do, but I didn't. And I'm just going to tape it together so that I can get a little bit of that form. And your armature is going to wiggle around while you're doing this. Just remember that it's very manipulatable. You can turn it back to where you want it to go. So that's about how thick those shoulders are. Now I want to get his belly, and I'll come back to you once I've got his form a little bit filled out. All right, so I have built him up kind of around these areas and given him a little bit more form. You can see how these forms aren't perfect. It's not exact, but it's kind of getting there. So if I pull it to the side, you can kind of see. And you can always go back and forth and check on this. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it over, and I want to do the side. So I'm going to look at him from the side and kind of line him up. And I'm going to start bending him so that he looks more like he's from the side. I'll bend his neck up. I'll make sure his legs are both coming down. They're a little bit wonky right now. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my newspaper to start building up thickness around his side, because as you can see, he's pretty thick coming down. So I'm going to start building that up, and I'll come back in a minute. I just want to check in for a minute and show you where I've gotten so far and make note of something. So I was building up his rump a little bit, and my tail kept getting lost. So I just made a yank and kind of pulled him back out again. So as you can see, he's starting to take some more of the proportions of what I've got here. Now I'm going to start working on his leg. Okay, so here is my zebra finished with this stage. Notice that I didn't really do, so I've got this thickness right here, but I didn't do a lot down here. And that's because I know that I've got more building up to do. So I just kind of wanted to get his biggest, bulkiest areas taken care of, and then these thin areas I'm going to do later. Also notice that I didn't completely cover him with masking tape, but I used as much masking tape as I needed to make sure that my newspaper would stay where I want it to stay. Now at this point, I'm going to have you do a little bit of manipulation, because if you just leave your zebra exactly like how it looks in the picture, it might be kind of boring. So I'm going to take his head and I'm just going to turn it a little bit as if he's looking this way. And I'm going to take his legs and I'm going to make it look like he's running. So I'm just going to kind of, you know, adjust him a little bit, not a horribly lot, but just enough to make it look a little bit more like he's alive. The other thing I want to mention is while you're doing this, you can only see one side of the zebra, but remember that he's symmetrical. So make sure that when you're turning him around, you're bulking up both sides. So you want to pay attention to how big he is from the top, and that's why we have the top of our zebra. You want to pay attention to how big he is from each side. And that should give you a pretty good amount of bulkiness. And we will continue with what you need to do next in our next video.